In 30 years of law enforcement, I've stared down cartel lieutenants, negotiated with bank robbers who had nothing left to lose, and once even wrestled a meth-addled alligator out of a suspect's bathtub in Florida. But nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, prepared me for the sheer, unadulterated psychological warfare of a suburban homeowners association president at 7 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. I remember the exact moment the peace broke. I was sitting inside the Beast. That's what my team calls our mobile command unit, a 40-foot, matte black, reinforced tactical RV that looks like a tour bus for a heavy metal band that hates publicity. And I was sipping lukewarm coffee, staring at a monitor that showed the front door of a house 4 lots down, waiting for a man named Julian Varga to make a mistake. Varga was a mid-level distributor for a fentanyl ring we'd been tracking for 6 months, a guy who washed his dirty money through high-end landscaping renovations. And we were finally close. We were inches away from getting the proof we needed to put him away for life. And then, the screeching started. If you don't move this junkyard on wheels by sunset, I am towing it myself. The voice was amplified, distorted by a cheap megaphone, cutting through the soundproofing of a vehicle designed to withstand small arms fire. I rubbed my temples, looking at the side camera feed, and there she was, Brenda Higgins, the self-appointed queen of Oak Creek Estates, standing on the edge of the curb like Napoleon at Waterloo. Except Napoleon probably didn't wear a neon pink velour tracksuit and oversized sunglasses that cost more than my first car. She was standing with her legs apart, power stance locked in, pointing that megaphone directly at my windshield, unaware that behind the dark tint, 3 high-definition cameras were recording the pores on her nose. She was screaming about property values and the aesthetic integrity of the cul-de-sac, completely oblivious to the fact that she was currently screaming at a federal surveillance asset. See, to Brenda, the Beast wasn't a hub of encrypted satellite uplinks and thermal imaging processors. It was an eyesore, a violation of Section 4, Paragraph C of the neighborhood bylaws regarding non-conforming recreational vehicles. And to be fair, we had parked it next to the community mailbox cluster, which was apparently hallowed ground. I watched her on the screen, just shaking my head. My partner, Agent Miller from the DEA, took his headphones off and looked at me with eyes that screamed, "Please let me arrest her." But I just held up a hand because we couldn't blow our cover. Not yet. "Ignore her," I said. "She's like a storm, Miller. She'll blow herself out." Boy, was I wrong, because Brenda wasn't a storm. She was climate change, persistent, inevitable, and getting worse by the hour. It started with the notes, passive-aggressive masterpieces taped to the door when we weren't looking. Things like, "Please be considerate of your neighbors who actually pay to live here," and "We have standards in Oak Creek." But when the notes didn't work, she escalated. By day 3, she brought out the drone. Now, imagine this. We are trying to intercept encrypted radio traffic from a cartel-safe house, and suddenly our proximity sensors go haywire because a consumer-grade quadcopter is buzzing 3 feet from our roof antenna like an angry hornet. I watched the feed as Brenda stood on her lawn, tongue sticking out in concentration, piloting this toy dangerously close to $50,000 worth of sensitive equipment. "Sheriff," Miller said, his voice tight, "she's going to clip the satellite dish. She touches that dish, and I'm going out there," I muttered, but she pulled back at the last second, probably just trying to get a look at who was inside, spying on the spies. The breaking point, though, the moment things went from annoying to actively dangerous, was the sticker incident. It was a Thursday afternoon. Varga, our target, had finally received a delivery. A landscaping truck had pulled into his driveway, and guys were unloading bags of mulch that sat way too heavy on their shoulders, likely packed with cash or product, and we were recording everything, getting the evidence that would seal the warrant. Suddenly, a shadow fell across the front sensors. Brenda marched up to the Beast, a bright orange sticker in her hand. One of those nasty, industrial adhesive, tow warning stickers that take a sandblaster to remove, and she slapped it right over the lens of our primary forward-facing camera. The control room went red. Alarms blared quietly inside the cabin as the system registered an obstruction on a critical node. "That's it," I said, standing up, but before I could even reach the door, the RV's automated perimeter defense system kicked in. We usually keep it disabled in residential zones, but Miller had re-enabled it after the drone incident, and a robotic, computerized voice boomed from the external speakers. loud enough to rattle the windows of the nearby houses. Warning: federal property. Do not obstruct. Step away from the vehicle. On the screen, I saw Brenda jump about 3 feet in the air. She clutched her chest, dropped her clipboard, and looked around wildly, trying to find the source of the voice. But instead of running away like a normal person who just got yelled at by a parked bus, she got angry. She pulled out her phone and started live streaming. I could hear her through the external mics, her voice trembling with that special kind of entitlement that only comes from never having been told no in your entire adult life. You hear that, everyone? Now they're using voice modulators to threaten me. This is intimidation. I am the president of this HOA, and I will not be bullied by transients in a gothic Winnebago. She paced back and forth, framing the shot so the beast looked menacing behind her, whipping her followers into a frenzy. And I knew right then we had a problem, because Varga was 4 houses down. And if he saw this circus, if he saw a transient RV talking like a federal agent, he was going to bolt. We need to de-escalate, Miller said, scrubbing his face with his hands. Maybe if we just move it down the block. If we move, she wins, I said. And yeah, maybe that was my ego talking, but you don't let the Brenda Higginses of the world dictate field operations. Besides, Varga's curtain just twitched. He's watching. If we leave now, it looks suspicious. We have to ride it out. But Brenda wasn't done riding. The next morning, at the crack of dawn, I woke up to the sound of a diesel engine idling heavily right outside our door, a deep, mechanical grumble that vibrated the floorboards. I checked the rear camera and couldn't believe my eyes. There was a tow truck backing up toward us. Not a professional city tow truck, mind you, but a beat-up, rust-bucket flatbed with a magnetic sign on the door that said Ricky's Recovery. And driving it was a guy who looked like he regretted every life choice that led him to this moment. Brenda was standing on the sidewalk, directing him with hand signals like she was landing a 747 on an aircraft carrier. "Hook it up, Ricky," she yelled. "Drag it to the impound. I'll sign the liability waiver." Ricky, bless his heart, looked hesitant. He was eyeing the size of the beast, probably realizing his winch cable would snap like a guitar string if he tried to pull 20 tons of armored plating. But Brenda was relentless. "Do it. They are violating the covenant." As Ricky started to lower the boom, I looked at Miller. "Okay, showtime." I flipped the master switch on the console. Instantly, the discrete panels along the roofline of the RV flipped open, revealing a light bar that exploded with red and blue strobes, blindingly bright in the morning gloom. The rear LED matrix, usually turned off, lit up with scrolling block letters. "Law enforcement vehicle, stand clear." A short, sharp siren chirp, whoop whoop, cut through the morning air like a knife. Ricky froze. The man turned to stone. He looked at the lights, looked at Brenda, and then threw his truck into drive so fast I heard the transmission scream for mercy. He didn't even lift the boom fully. He just peeled out, leaving tire marks on the asphalt, disappearing down the street. Brenda stood there, bathed in the flashing blue light, her mouth opening and closing like a goldfish dropped on the carpet. I opened the side door and stepped out. Now, I wasn't in uniform. I was wearing flannel and tactical pants, looking like a tired uncle who just wants to fish, but I had my badge clipped to my belt and my sidearm visible. "Ma'am," I said, my voice calm but carrying that weight that stops people in their tracks. "You have exactly 3 seconds to step off the roadway before I arrest you for interfering with a federal investigation." She blinked, her brain misfiring as it tried to reconcile eyesore RV with federal agent. Her face went through a kaleidoscope of colors, pale, then red, then a blotchy purple. You can't park here," she stammered, pointing a shaking finger at the rig. "The bylaws, the color scheme, it's not earth tones. The bylaws." I stepped closer, looming over her just a bit. "Ma'am, do you realize you just tried to tow a mobile command center? Do you realize that live stream you posted yesterday is currently being reviewed by Homeland Security because you threatened a government asset? We aren't campers. We are the police." Neighbors were coming out on their porches now, coffee mugs in hand, watching the show. I saw a guy in a bathrobe across the street actually pump his fist when he saw Brenda backing down. "But it's ugly," she whispered, her final, desperate defense. I pulled out my phone and hit play on a recording from 2 days ago, amplifying the audio so the neighbors could hear. It was Brenda's voice, clear as day. If nobody claims it by Friday, I'm going to have the locks drilled and turn it into my personal office. Possession is 9/10 of the law. I looked at her. Conspiracy to commit auto theft. Destruction of government property. You're racking up felonies like they're frequent flyer miles, Brenda. She looked around at her neighbors, her subjects, hoping for backup, but all she got were smirks and turned backs. She let out a noise that sounded like a deflating tire, turned on her heel, and power walked back to her house, clutching her clipboard to her chest like a shield. I thought that was the end of it. I thought we'd won. But as I turned to go back inside, I glanced down the street toward Varga's house. The driveway was empty. The landscaping truck was gone. The curtains were wide open, which meant the house was empty. My heart sank. Brenda's little circus, the lights, the siren, the shouting, it had spooked him. Varga was gone. I walked back into the RV, and Miller slammed his laptop shut. We lost the feed. Varga's phones just went dark. He dumped them. He's running. 3 months of work. The surveillance, the wiretaps, the sleepless nights. All of it flushed down the drain because a woman in a pink tracksuit didn't like the color of our truck. I sat in the captain's chair, staring at the empty screens, feeling that heavy, leaden weight of failure. We have to pack up, Miller said quietly. The location is burned. If Varga is smart, he's halfway to the border by now. No, I said, staring at the monitor, specifically at the feed showing Brenda's house. We don't leave yet. Why? The target is gone. Because, I said, zooming in on the image. Varga didn't just run because of the noise. He ran because he has connections. He knew we were close. And I want to know how a mid-level thug feels comfortable living in a neighborhood like this, running a cash business under the nose of the strictest HOA president in history. See, that was the thing. Brenda fined people for having the wrong shade of mulch. How did she miss Varga running a money laundering operation out of his garage? Miller, I said, a new plan forming in my gut. Forget Varga for a second. Pull the HOA records. I want to see the financials. I want to know everything about Brenda Higgins. It took Miller about an hour to crack the HOA's digital filing system. Brenda's password was BrendaRules1, and what we found was enlightening. You know how people say absolute power corrupts absolutely? Well, apparently, absolute power over a subdivision corrupts hilariously. Brenda wasn't just a tyrant. She was a thief. We found receipts for community morale events that were actually spa days for her and her sister. We found a bill for an $8,000 concrete swan statue that was listed as security infrastructure. But then we found the smoking gun. Look at this, Miller said, pointing at a recurring payment. Landscaping and common area maintenance, $5,000 a month, paid to Greenleaf Solutions. Who owns Greenleaf? I asked, though I already had a feeling. It's a shell company, Miller typed furiously. Registered to Anthony Delgado. That's Varga's real name. I sat back, letting it sink in. Brenda, the woman who measured grass height with a ruler, was paying the cartel to mow the non-existent community lawns. She was laundering their money. Now, maybe she didn't know it was drug money. Maybe she just thought she was getting a kickback from a shady contractor. But she was the link. She was the reason Varga felt safe here. He had the HOA president in his pocket. She's not just a nuisance, I said, a grim smile forming. She's an accomplice. So do we arrest her? Miller asked. Not yet, I said. Varga is in the wind, but he's greedy. He left in a hurry, which means he left assets behind. And if he thinks the heat has died down, if he thinks the feds were just harassed away by the crazy HOA lady, he might come back for his money. We needed to set a trap. And unfortunately, the bait had to be Brenda. We moved the beast that night. We didn't leave the neighborhood. We just repositioned to the far side of the park, went completely dark. No lights, no movement. We made it look like we gave up. Then, we waited. Sure enough, Brenda took the bait. The next day, she posted a video titled, "Victory Over Tyranny," standing in the empty spot where our RV used to be. She was gloating, claiming she had single-handedly driven the FBI out of Oak Creek. She announced a Freedom Town Hall to celebrate, right there in the cul-de-sac. It was painful to watch, but it was perfect. She was signaling to the world, and to Varga, that the coast was clear. 2 days later, during Brenda's ridiculous town hall, where she was serving lukewarm potato salad and giving a speech about the resilience of the suburbs, a black sedan rolled quietly into the neighborhood. It had tinted windows and no plates. Target acquisition, Miller whispered into the comms. That's Varga's cousin. He's scouting. The sedan drove past the party. Brenda actually waved at it, probably thinking it was an admirer. The car circled the block, saw no RV, saw no cops, just a delusional woman with a microphone, and drove off. He bought it, I said. They're coming back. It happened 3 nights later. 3 a.m. The neighborhood was dead quiet. The beast was still dark, but inside, we were fully alerted, thermal cameras locked on Brenda's backyard. Why Brenda's backyard? Because that's where the Greenleaf landscaping crew had done extensive work just 2 weeks prior. A van pulled into the alley behind her fence. 2 figures jumped out with shovels. They didn't go to Varga's house. They went straight for Brenda's prize-winning rose garden. They buried the cash in her yard, Miller whispered, watching the thermal ghosts dig. That's why he felt safe. He used her property as a vault because nobody harasses the HOA president. Move in, I ordered. We didn't use sirens this time. We used stealth. The TAC team moved through the shadows like smoke. We caught Varga's men just as they were pulling a heavy, waterproof duffel bag out of the dirt. Federal agents. Drop it. They froze. It was over in seconds. But the commotion woke up the house. The backlight flipped on, and the sliding glass door flew open. There stood Brenda, in a silk robe, holding a glass of wine, looking at 6 heavily armed agents and 2 cartel enforcers handcuffed face down in her petunias. What is the meaning of this? She shrieked. I distinctly told you people to leave. I stepped out of the shadows, walking right up to her patio. Brenda, shut up. She gasped. Excuse me. I said shut up. You're standing 2 feet away from a bag containing $1 million in drug money that was buried under your roses by the company you've been illegally paying with HOA funds. You're not the president anymore, Brenda. You're a suspect. The color drained from her face so fast I thought she was going to faint. She looked at the hole in the ground, looked at the handcuffs, and for the first time in her life, she had absolutely nothing to say. The raid that followed was surgical. We raided her office, which was just a spare bedroom filled with filing cabinets, and seized everything. The binders, the fake receipts, the forged signatures. It was a treasure trove. It turns out Varga had been using the HOA accounts to wash money for years, and Brenda, in her arrogance and greed, had signed off on every single transaction because it made her look like she had a massive budget to play with. The trial was quieter than I expected. I thought Brenda would go down fighting, screaming about her rights. But when the prosecutors laid out the evidence, the embezzlement, the laundering, the obstruction of justice, she folded. Her lawyer, a tired-looking guy who clearly wasn't getting paid enough, advised her to take a deal. She didn't go to prison, surprisingly. The judge, seeing that she was more stupid than malicious regarding the drugs, gave her 5 years probation, a massive fine that wiped out her savings, and, my personal favorite part of the sentence, a lifetime ban from holding any position in any homeowners association anywhere in the country. She had to sell the house to pay the restitution. I was there the day she moved out. I wasn't in the RV. I was in my personal truck, just watching. She walked out to her car, carrying a box of those stupid plastic flamingos she used to put on her lawn. She looked smaller, defeated. She saw me watching her, paused for a second, and I tipped my baseball cap to her. She didn't wave back. She just got in her car and drove away, leaving Oak Creek forever. The neighborhood changed after that. A new board was elected. A nice librarian lady took over, and the first thing she did was repeal the ban on street parking and non-earth tone curtains. The vibe in the cul-de-sac lifted, like a heavy fog had burned off. Kids were playing in the street again. People were actually talking to each other instead of hiding behind their blinds. I went back there about 6 months later, just to check in. I walked through the park, and I saw something that made me laugh out loud. Right there, near the mailbox cluster where I had parked the beast, someone had installed a new bench. There was a little brass plaque on it. It read, "In honor of the mystery RV, thanks for taking out the trash." I sat on that bench for a while, watching the sun go down over the peaceful, normal, wonderfully messy neighborhood. We didn't catch the head of the cartel that day. Varga is still in the wind, though we're getting closer. But we took down his network, seized his cash, and liberated 100 people from a tyrant in a pink tracksuit. And you know, sometimes, in this line of work, you take the wins where you can get them. So, here's my question for you guys watching. We've all dealt with difficult neighbors. But have you ever seen someone let a little bit of power go to their head so badly they accidentally joined organized crime? At what point do you stand up to an HOA that's gone rogue? Let me know your horror stories in the comments below. I read all of them. And remember, be nice to your neighbors. You never know which one of them might be sitting in a surveillance bin watching your roses. Stay safe out there.